Thanks for coming. I'm Jay Borenstein. I teach computer science at Stanford and also have the title Education Modernizer at Facebook. Describe a little bit about how that came to be in a minute. And am joined by Scott Chacon from GitHub. Want to say hi?
Hello. I'm Scott Chacon from GitHub. Co-founder. I've been there for about 6 years now, and I've been helping Jay out in his classroom every once in a while. Come and talk about open source and GitHub and Git, and so he invited me to come up and talk a little bit about what Jay's doing in his classrooms.
Yeah, so definitely grateful that you're here. I want to sort of walk through the history of how Facebook Open Academy got started, and it started at Stanford, essentially. We I think, do a pretty good job teaching computer science at Stanford. We have some students who go on to do good things. But we felt like the feedback we were getting both from industry and from some of our students was a lot of what a person who graduates with a CS degree does is software engineering work. That's they're building things. And our curriculum was very much oriented towards teaching theory, going through assignments to learn different specialty areas. And we think we were doing a good job at that, but maybe we weren't preparing our students as well for the job that they actually were going to be doing out there. So the challenge was, without turning this into a vocational educational process, how could we better equip our CS students to be successful out there in their professional roles as part of the CS degree that they were getting? And so a number of years ago at Stanford, we started doing this, and the model that we came up with was we would partner with industry, with corporate collaborators. And so we partnered with all the who's who on the software side of things to build different things. And we had the leverage, just being Stanford, someone that these corporations wanted to have an affiliation with, that they would do it. They would partner with us, they would give us some money, they would invest some resources into a research collaboration, and we could expose the students a little bit to what it meant to be doing software engineering behind this corporate firewall. But it really wasn't all the way there. We wanted to do something better. And as part of that, I met Mike Schreffner and some other folks, Zuck and some other people from Facebook, and there was this dialogue that we started having. They were like, hey, your class, Jay, is producing a lot of the kind of software engineers that we like to hire. How do we do more of that? And so I didn't really think too much of it at the time, but I sort of noodled on that for a few years, and eventually came back and said, look, if you really want to do this, I have an idea for you. It's going to take some resources, and I think it should be done in an open source model, in partnership with open source projects. And to Facebook's lasting credit, they took a very missionary view of this, which was there doesn't need to be any tie. So some other companies that I talked to that I won't mention really wanted to tie doing something like this to recruiting objectives. And to Facebook's credit, that it was very missionary. Like, this produces the kind of software engineering people that we do like to hire. We'll take our chances hiring them. But also, it's just the right thing to do. So yes, we'll give you some resources to go do this. Go. So that was kind of the birth of Open Academy. Now, at Stanford, we had one of the things that we had done in partnership with GitHub was we had said that our students were going to be doing their development work on GitHub using Git, and that we were going to be holding our office hours and doing code reviews with them using the review tools that GitHub provided us. So amazingly, and I'm really indebted to Scott for this, because it was actually kind of something I had to sell to the administration and to the students. They would roll their eyes. Oh, we're going to do this through GitHub now? I mean, come on. Whereas now, they thank me. They're hungry for that. They're glad for that. So we had this infrastructure where we were leveraging kind of the ultimate open source community in GitHub already, and that was kind of a proof point that, hey, we're onto something here and we can do this. That was used as we sold this to other universities around the world.
So I'm actually kind of curious. I wanted to ask you a question about this. When I first came and started speaking to your class, it was, we're going to use GitHub. Can you please teach us how to use GitHub, or really more importantly, how to use Git, right? Which is, I still, when I came and gave the talk to your class a couple months ago, was still the thing, how to use Git. The landscape has changed a lot, and since we started doing this, where in the beginning it was like you would use Git Git to do open source stuff, and then they would go into the real world or whatever, and they'd use Perforce, or they'd use Subversion in some cases, but a lot of times like a proprietary version control system that you wouldn't use in open source under any circumstances. So are you finding over the years that is changing a lot, that your students knowing Git and having worked in sort of a collaborative environment with Git, when they go into the workforce, are they using Git in the workforce now a lot?
Yeah, so I think that's the great question. Definitely seeing convergence there. So I think that, for one thing, we have a lot of students who are pretty entrepreneurial, and so the fact that they've been exposed to something that is an industrial grade solution for this, they actually apply that, and that just stays in the DNA of these companies that they're starting all the way through. And some of those companies are pretty mature now. But also we see lots of larger companies who have migrated towards that paradigm. So I think they're getting actually more value than just sort of teaching them that in the classroom. They're actually using that in their professional lives too. So definitely seeing that. Okay, so where are we with this program? So we reached out to some of the top computer science universities in the world and basically had this conversation with them. Here's our experience at Stanford. We think that there's an opportunity to plug students in as contributors to open source projects where there are mentors who are either core committers or very frequent committers on those projects who will invest some time, maybe 2 to 3 hours a week, in getting these students up to the speed to the point where they can make meaningful pull requests. We think this is a really valuable thing to do. This exposes students to skills like having to find their way around in a substantial existing code base. That's a skill. That's something that they're going to use in their professional lives again and again, and they don't get that at all in the assignments that we're giving them. So we think this is a really valuable thing for them to do. And originally, we were getting all this pushback from faculty, which is, well, oh, that's great. Even if we wanted to do that, we can't do that because I don't have the capacity as a professor to dig into all these different projects and know them well enough where I can supervise the students and educate them. But we've kind of mitigated that a little bit because we're leveraging the open source community. So there's a win from the faculty side because they can focus on teaching what they think is important to software engineering, whether that's agile programming methodologies or something related to distributed source control or any of a variety of other things that pair programming that gets overlaid on this curriculum, and they don't have to get into the specifics of doing the code review, which is actually better served by the mentors of this project. So big win from the faculty side. That certainly was well received. So the next piece that we thought was important was that students receive academic credit for what they're doing. So this needs to count towards a person's computer science degree at their accredited institution. So a student at Stanford who enrolls in Open Academy and is working towards making pull requests on these open source projects, they're getting units that count towards 105 units that they have to do within the CS department to have their degree conferred. And that just makes them a stakeholder at a level that gets their attention, shall we say. So I think that's really critical. And one of the things that I worried about as I rolled this out and tried to do it beyond Stanford's walls was, would my faculty colleagues, would they be receptive to having to do the frankly not very fun work of lobbying their administration to get a class accredited for something that was taking place in this open source paradigm? And certainly got better at doing that, but what I discovered was within the institutions, there are always a few faculty members who really are believers in the teaching aspect of teaching at the university level as opposed to the research aspect. That they're really passionate about it. And those are the ones that are willing to do the heavy lifting, do the work, to cause the course to be accredited and count towards the person's CS degree. And so that process actually was very heartening. There are a lot of things that you find that are kind of demoralizing when you're out there in the teaching world, but the reception of my colleagues and the effort that they went to have this be accredited at their schools was awesome. And so where we stand now, which happened very rapidly, is we have 25 of the top 50 CS universities in the world. We have Stanford and MIT and Carnegie Mellon, a litany of other ones. I won't go through the whole list, but also University of Singapore, University of Tokyo, Imperial College of London, lots of international presence as well, Unicamp in Brazil. So there's a recognition at the university level around the world that there's real value in connecting with open source projects as a practical way to show students what software engineering is like. and how to do that. So big win from kind of the university side, pretty clearly understood.
I am kind of curious if this has changed the open source projects that you work with as well from your conversations with the mentors that you've had, because I know it's a pretty lengthy process to find a mentor and to have them agree to do it, right? Because it takes a fair amount of time on their part to walk students through stuff and do the reviews and things like that. But what's really cool about it that is sort of problematic that we see in a lot of open source projects is it's hard for people to get into open source sometimes, right? It's very intimidating. There's people that have been working on it for a really long time. And what I really like about this program is that you get a mentor, you get somebody who's been working on these projects for a while to be welcoming to sort of newbies, people that have maybe really good programming chops but aren't familiar with contributing to an open source project. I think that's been a big change in open source over the last 5 years or so, especially with GitHub stuff, is that it's been easier to contribute to open source projects. Like if you wanted to do it 5 or 10 years ago, like getting onto a mailing list and doing patches, like it was all sort of very difficult. I like that, but even today, like people will join GitHub or people will try to get involved in open source, and the community itself can sometimes be somewhat intimidating or difficult to get into. Like, have you seen changes in the open source projects that you're working with to make it easier for not even just the students, but like maybe other people in the community that are trying to contribute as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it reminds me, so I would say each of the last 3 years at Stanford, I've had a student group approach me and say, we want to do a student-led class that is about just getting prepared to be an open source contributor. Like that sounds really good to me intuitively as the student who is good at computer science and I like to do good in the world and I think this project is awesome and I want to contribute to it, but it's really all very vague to me. I want to build a class that Stanford students can take for 1 unit that teaches them how to contribute to open source. And it happens every year because it never actually gets to the point where this class is implemented. And the reason for that is still, I would say, that the requirements are pretty custom, project to project. Like the understanding that you need to get confidence to actually reach out into that community and ask questions and make the pull requests, that still seems to be the barrier, at least for my students, that they're, I think, unfortunately, afraid to look dumb. And they have a hard time just getting to the point where they can kind of get over that initial hurdle and start making those requests. So we can't find something that cuts across all the open source projects that we can equip them with that gives them enough confidence to maybe choose any one and start being a contributor there. So I don't have that one sort of sits out there as a little bit of a problem. I'd be curious to get your thoughts if we could sort of bite off things. Certainly using GitHub and just getting familiar with that workflow is one thing we could do, and that spans all these projects. But what are some of the other ones that that we could do that we could put in a class like that?
Yeah, I mean that's always been an interesting thing about like programs like Google Summer of Code that does something sort of similar, except you don't get credit, you get sort of a stipend to do it. But the really value, because I was a mentor 1 year, and the real huge value that I'd see in like the Git project every year is the entire Git mailing list getting together and being like, what are some sort of bite-sized projects that people can start getting into this and learn the code base, and it's something achievable in a small time span. And I don't know that they really think about it this way, but it's a great way of getting over that hurdle of intimidation where like you're accepted by the community, you're going to be accepted by the community if you want to take on one of these projects. And this does this as well. And I would actually love to see this more broadly, right? Like have for the open source projects that want help to be able to say, here's how to prepare your community to get outside help from people that are a little bit newer and get mentorship and not be afraid to contribute, because it's still really difficult. It's easier than it was before, but it's still really difficult. Do you work with the mentors to figure out how to do that, like how to identify stuff that's doable?
Yeah, so I think that's maybe the intersection. We have a process where we ask the mentor to think about if you assume the student has no familiarity with your project coming in. You want to produce a document that's not intimidating, so one or two pages of what you would do in the first week to get up to speed. How would you configure your development environment? What are some tutorials you might take? Are there some trivial issues that you would start with as a way to start swimming around the code base? So we do have this valuable piece. And what I have seen in Open Academy is year over year, the mentor will iterate on that document. So it's a living document that's getting better each year. And for that particular project, that becomes the thing that they give to the students each year to start with. And so that is working. And so I think if we tackled it project by project, like it's realistic. If projects start thinking about that as a really valuable piece of IP, that having this thing that we can just easily give to somebody who wants to contribute, and that's kind of the best practice for getting up to speed, that would be super. That would accomplish, I think, the objective. Yeah, super cool. All right, so I want to kind of focus on we talked about the value from the university side. I want to look at it from the student side. And this is certainly the most gratifying part of it. That's why we do it, to try to give the students a good experience, better prepare them to be successful, to make informed choices about the kind of jobs that they want to do. And it's gratifying because year over year I get these emails from a lot of the participants in Open Academy that just say, this is the best course that I took at University X. I learned more in the first 3 weeks of this class than I learned in the last 2 years at school. And I think I don't want to devalue all the other teaching that we're doing as part of the CS degree, because I think that foundation is actually really critical, and you wouldn't get it any other way. But I think it's really exciting to the students. This feels like really tangible learning that they're going to get to apply out in the field, and they get to actually see their results in action, because there's users of this software and things like this, and they make friends or connections with other people who are contributing to the project. So it's this mind-blowing experience for them about working on a software project of scale, and the fact that happens within kind of the friendly confines of a university environment where they have a faculty person overseeing it, and they have a mentor who's agreed to invest his time or her time in getting them up to speed. It feels safer, and it feels good. So they super value what we're doing here. And the feedback that we're getting from, oftentimes they will go work in something related to this project, or we'll stay in touch with them if they go do other things, start their own company or whatever. But the feedback in the long run that we get from their professional colleagues is that they're more productive sooner. So we think big win all the way around from the student standpoint.
So I'm curious, this is a computer science course, and is it a graduate course or an undergrad course?
Yeah, so senior at Stanford anyway. It's senior undergrads and master's level students, and so that's the way we kind of stipulate it across U.S. universities, and we try to map that to whatever paradigm they're using in the other countries.
And I know for the corporate, when you were doing this as a sort of corporate partnership with a bunch of different companies, that you would have people other than software developers participating as well. You'd have designers and or at least we discussed this to some degree. Do you get people other than software development or software developers working on these projects in a collaborative manner as well?
Not at the student level right now. So one of the gaps that we'd like to fill is around the digital designer piece. So right now at Stanford, if you are a student who has an interest in computer science and you also have an aptitude and interest in design, the way you really prepare yourself to be excellent at that is you customize your own major. You take some classes from the art school, you take some classes from CS, and you figure it out. So that's not really a great service to that particular student. And we have the ability to sort of go cross-department at our university. So when we do have these corporate projects, if there is a design element that's critical to the project, we will pull in students from different departments, and that's a real asset. We haven't figured out a great way to do that in Open Academy yet, but the sense is the right thing is to do something in parallel, where we have an Open Academy that's focused on kind of the design class skill set, as opposed to the software engineering skill set.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think would be really valuable in the open source community as well. That's one of the things that it's a really big difference between doing software development in a sort of corporate environment and doing software development in the open source world, is that in a corporate environment, it needs, you generally have to have designers and technical writers working on whatever project you're producing, or else it's not going to be sort of commercially viable, right? Whereas in open source, I mean, I think that's very common, that it doesn't look very good, right? It's very sort of Spartan in some ways. It's like figure it out yourself. And I mean, it would be fantastic, I think, for a lot of open source projects to be better at being able to say, here's what we need, here's what we like, here's how to contribute, which is something that is just not documented very well in the open source community generally, right? I think that would be really valuable to show open source projects how to do that effectively.
I think that's a Great idea. I like that. So yeah, we always, right now, the sort of ask of the mentor as part of this program is you're spending 2 to 3 hours a week of your time, and you have to enjoy the process of being a teacher and bringing these students along, because sometimes it's going to be frustrating work, particularly in the beginning. We do screen for very talented students, so there's a really sort of a lot of horsepower there, and the uptake will be high, but they're students, and they start out pretty raw, and so you're spending a lot of time getting them up to speed in those early stages. Towards the end of the quarter or semester, depending upon the school, you're sort of interacting with them more traditionally, where you're using your time to review pull requests and things like that. But it'd be nice if we could sort of, there's this feel-good element, that's ROI for a mentor who's involved in this. There's the element of kind of seeding the project with really talented people who are going to be thought leaders in the digital world going forward, seeding them with knowledge of your project, of its importance, and with the aptitude of taking advantage of it. So that's super valuable ROI. But then, if other ways, if we could actually give back something that was a deliverable, was sort of something actionable around how to design, that'd be great too. Is there a question?
How do you find OS project? Well, how do you choose?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, how do we choose open source projects? It's very subjective at this point. So we, meaning me, come to conferences like this, or I will submit pull requests myself, go through the process, the workflow of different open source projects, or know people, or ask Scott for his recommendations. And what I'm looking for are people who are very capable of software engineers. I'm looking for projects that my term is relevant in the current software ecosystem, meaning the students will care about them, and they're active. There's development going on there. And then there's this kind of subjective feel for the mentor. Does that person have the right mentality, or are they going to become, are they not going to be nice to the students, which is what we're trying to avoid. But that's the process. So if you were interested, you would drop me a note.
So once you choose these projects, how do the students get assigned to them? Do they self-select, or is there do you have problems with sort of contention?
You do. You have a little bit of that, but not too much. So backing up, one of the choices we've made with Open Academy is to partner with really elite CS schools, because that's our filter for having high horsepower students coming into this. And we feel like that's the only responsible way to ask mentors to contribute time to this, that they have to be working with high caliber students, so they can expect those students to be quick on the uptake and be responsible about taking advantage of the advice that they're receiving. So it's, I think, working in that way, but that's also a limitation in how the program can scale. But I think it's good for what it does. Question again?
How do the students select?
Right. How do the students select? So we have the mentors write up a very sort of high-level description of the genre of the project, and another paragraph that describes what the student should expect to get out of this if they were to work on that project. So, what are some of the skills that you might be exposed to, maybe languages that you would develop in, concepts, theories, etc. Just what do you expect to learn? And then based on a pretty broad description, students will rank their project preferences. And then we feed this into an algorithm, and certainly some projects get a lot of top rankings from students, and we're not going to assign that would overload the mentor if we signed them all there. But it usually works out that every student selecting among, say, 30 projects will get one of their top 3 choices. So they come in pretty motivated, self-motivated to be productive and learn from being involved in this project. So we have that process up front, and we handle that. We sort of try to take our philosophy is to take all the administrative burden off the students, off the mentors, off the faculty to the extent that we can, and make it as streamlined as possible.
Are there any non-students that are involved in this, or that are able to sort of work with these students as well, other than the people involved in open source? It's not
Yeah, no, on the student side of the equation, you've got the faculty colleague at each university. There's three constituents: the faculty colleague who's overseeing this course for credit, you've got the open source project itself and the mentor, and then you've got students from those universities who are receiving academic credit. Those are the people that are involved at this point. Okay, were there other questions? Yeah.
I'm interested in open source education at more of like high school and middle school level.
Yeah.
Any suggestions or any research that's been done with that?
Yeah, so the question was, he's interested in open source education at the high school or even middle school level. I'm glad that you asked that. I have spent a significant part of the last 6 months investigating how we try to have an impact at that level. And it was a little frustrating, to be honest with you, because a lot of the assumptions that you can make at the university level about the infrastructure that's going to be there, the mentality of the faculty that's there, you can't do that at the high school and middle school level. They're quite different if you go to a very disadvantaged area versus, say, a private school in an advantaged area. You have a really different situation there. So if you were trying to design this impactful curriculum that was going to span across all the high schools and middle schools, my feeling at this stage is that you are pretty far away from a one-size-fits-all solution. You would have to do something else. So my intuition at this stage, and this is actually something we're working on internally at Facebook, is to do something that is in partnership but outside of the schools themselves. That's a little bit more, gives you a little bit more freedom in the way you design what you're doing. Because unfortunately, at some of the most disadvantaged situations, it's all about just providing safety at the school. There's a lot of concern about job security amongst the faculty there. There are a lot of things to overcome before they can start thinking about computer science education. Is there another question there?
Have you ever thought about partnering with research and education networks, the state networks that generally connect schools?
Question about partnering with sort of research networks at the state level. Does that capture it? Have not explored that, but be curious to hear more about what you have in mind on that. Yeah.
What commitment do you ask of the host companies? For example, pay, work hours, duration of work for the students and so forth?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the commitment from the companies that are involved in this? Well, so in Open Academy, it's an individual's commitment that we're looking for, not the company. So the individual who's going to be a mentor is a committer to a project, and we ask that person allocate 2 to 3 hours a week to be available to the students. And we really want that divided up into kind of two things. One is a weekly Agile meeting, not more than 30 minutes, but you use a Hangout or IRC or whatever your medium of choice is to interact with all the students that you're mentoring as a group, so they can all be learning together for that 30 minutes, and you set expectations for what's going to happen week over week that way. And then the rest of your time is being available for the really dumb questions at first, and then kind of the unstick me questions. I'm really hung up on this aspect of the code base questions that come along a little bit down the road. So that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Just to follow up, so you don't, in fact, have an arrangement with the company itself, rather with employees, mentors who happen to work at the company.
Correct. Yep. Stanford's model is different. Stanford has a model directly with the companies, but in Open Academy, that is not a constraint, which makes life a lot easier. Yeah.
I remember the open source project, don't laugh, I think it was called Moodle. Is that still alive as a learning language, a learning system that's open source?
I've heard tell that it's still alive. The question was, he was asking about Moodle, which was a learning tool that has been around for a while. I'm quite sure it's actually still around, and I believe there's some of my colleagues using it, but I am not one of those. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, that's sort of single classroom administration software. Actually, sort of to that point, though, if people did want to take to not reinvent sort of the wheels that you're having to go through and learn all these lessons and stuff, is the stuff that you're doing, your curriculum, your syllabi, like, is that all available somewhere, or have you documented it, or could people take this and try to re-implement it in places that they have a little bit more control over? Yeah, so that is the hope, that eventually there will be a federated group of open academies that can be administered by anybody who wants to do them. And sort of, here's our blueprint for doing it, here are the things you need, here are the resources you need. The one wild card in all of this is one of the things that Facebook enables us to do is to fly everybody who's involved into one place to spend a weekend together. That's an expensive proposition. It's a heavy lift, and it takes a private company that really cares about the value of all this to make that happen, but it's incredibly valuable. So we call it a code sprint, and we do it about at the 1/3 point of the class for the average student. And so all the students from around the world, and it really is from around the world, will come to usually it's on Facebook campus, and be there for the weekend. Is it Facebook's campus? Other than that, there's no kind of marketing element to it. And the mentors are there, and the faculty are there as well. So all the parties involved have a face-to-face connection at that point, which makes a huge difference. Really makes people comfortable to ask the questions they might not otherwise ask. It makes them feel accountable to each other. And it also turbocharges their learning. You see amazing things happen during that weekend. So it's a lot of fun. So that's the one piece that is maybe hard to do in a model where you just take kind of the blueprint for it. But definitely, Facebook.com/Open Academy program is where we list what we're doing. So other than that, are there other opportunities for the students to talk to each other and to share experiences of this works or this doesn't work, or this is sort of compare notes on how to go get through this process successfully? Yeah. So I think we do a pretty good job of that project by project. Each mentor will make a decision about what tools they like to use for their group to interact, and they all support each other very well. We do have a mechanism, which right now we used Google Groups for a while, we used Facebook Groups, and neither of those have been awesome solutions for everybody who's in the program. So we do have this kind of alumni group that thousands of students are a part of who have come through Open Academy, and they can communicate with each other there, but it's honestly not that active of a group. So I don't think there's a ton of value from that right now. So that is a problem we would like to solve better. And likewise, is there a group for the mentors, like for the mentors to share notes and say that group is active and valuable. And we just use a basic Facebook group for that. We post our templates for communication and other things to make their lives easier there. The group communication mechanism is really effective there. What is the retention for the mentors? Do they continue doing it sort of semester after semester? Yeah, so I think that's one of the great validating pieces of this, that the universities, all the parties involved really want to stay involved. And from the mentor side, that's unusual, because you'll see in Summer of Code and some of the other things, that's not always the case. And I think the reason is because the caliber of student and the fact that there's faculty supervision at the universities. Again, I think there's just more ROI for the mentor. They see just more of an investment and return on that investment from their time from the students. So there'll certainly be the case, like this year we're going to have a fall edition in addition to a winter-spring edition. There'll be mentors who choose to do one or the other, not both, just making a time choice. But I don't think we've had anyone who hasn't come back for a second bite. Yeah? Yep, great question. So the question was around how have we been keeping track of the demographics of the students that are involved, and have we compared that to these different universities. So as part of this, a lot of my faculty colleagues are interested in writing papers around some of the data that we gather or the experience that students have. And some of those papers are related to the demographics of the students and how that translates to the experience that they're having. So we actually have quite a bit of data on that. The synopsis is that the demographics they're what you expect they basically reflect the schools that we have in the program. And so in terms of gender diversity, we're not any worse, but we're not necessarily any better, for example. That's something, as the father of 2 daughters, that I'm very sensitive to. So it's a issue that I want to make better, but I believe that's its own issue that we're sort of treating independently of trying to do a good job with Open Academy.
Yeah.
A lot of open source projects require that the participants sign a CLA, and I'm curious how that interacts with universities and different legal jurisdictions, especially with graduate students that are on a scholarship. They may have signed some kind of IP assignment agreement with the university. Do you have problems around that area?
That's the kind of heavy lifting I was talking about from the faculty champion. When they go get this accredited, they have to do the hard work of making it okay. And in some cases, that's harder work than in other cases. But we have not run into any issues with that. A person who's properly motivated can make it happen from a faculty standpoint, and universities are usually pretty open to that. There are some instances where we would be sensitive to the open source project has to be truly open source. It can't be, it can't be selectively open source. Okay. Other questions?
How has the program changed? So you've been doing this for several semesters now. So from when you sort of first started it, and we're trying to figure out, how to make this successful to now. Like, what are some of the iterative steps that you have taken to make sure that it's successful for the university, for the faculty there, for the mentors, for the students?
Right. Well, there are a lot of little things that are going to be issues. For example, different calendars, academic calendars for schools around the world. So Stanford starts in late September. University of Tokyo actually has their main break in February. So a lot of things that are off like that, and I sort of treated those initially as opportunities. I think that's the reality is not everybody in a professional world is on the same schedule, but they prove to be more challenges than opportunities. So one of the things we try to do is have the students on any given project have their academic calendars a little bit more in line. Another thing is, one of our goals, the initial 4 years ago when we started this, we wanted to make sure we had multiple students from each university working on the same project, and we wanted to have them do pair programming. We thought that'd be super useful as just to have that local resource and support network to do that. And I think the rationale for that was sound, but the reality was, the feedback from the mentors was not all of our issues really lend themselves to pair programming, and most of them ended up wanting to assign individual things to their students. So that wasn't something that was successful to have that be a tenet of Open Academy. So now it's up to the mentor whether or not they want to assign issues to a group of students or to individual students. So things like that we've learned. We've gotten better each year, and hopefully we'll keep doing that.
So that kind of brings up a point of how are the teams themselves selected? Is it mostly like like everybody's in Brazil or everybody's in Tokyo working on the project, or are they across universities that are working on the same project?
Across universities. So we do want a cultural exchange as part of this. We think that's just the value add that's easy to take off the table as part of this. We're doing all the heavy work to create this international community. We should have these people meet each other and be friends and share cultural ideas. So things that have nothing to do with computer science, I think, are some of the most valuable aspects of the experience for students. I know that some of my students last year were working with students from the University of Tokyo, and those are, I think, going to be lifelong friends for them now. And seeing how the computer science curriculum was taught at the University of Tokyo and contrasting that with Stanford, that was certainly interesting from an academic standpoint. I think it opened people's eyes on both sides. But I think the friendship that they developed and the ability to have these conversations about their different cultures was awesome. And so we definitely want to do that.
Do you have any issues with time zones or languages, language barriers?
For sure, time zones. Languages, right now we require that everyone can communicate, at least in written form, in English. Okay. So that's how we get around that. Time zones is a challenge. And so it is the case that some projects have their 30-minute Agile meeting every week at 9 in the morning Pacific time, because that's 9 in the evening somewhere else. But where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. So you don't try to do any clustering or anything around time zones yet, or now?
It is one of the factors in our algorithm, but we choose to prioritize the student preferences most highly.
Gotcha.
So if there's a tie, then we're going to put the students on the project they most want to be on instead of the project that's most aligned with time zones.
And we're almost out of time, so I'm kind of curious what you see the future of the project being. Like, where do you want to go with it? How do you want to expand it?
Well, I think the future's, you alluded to the future, which is to template what we've done as much as possible and make it something that is viable for other groups to execute based on the learning that we've had. Because we think that's really the only way for this to scale. Part of what's great about it is we're creating this really tight relationship between the mentor and the student, and we have the faculty involvement. but that also those tight relationships create real scale challenges. It's hard to scale that. You can't have one mentor serving thousands of people like in a MOOC. You have to have that relationship between 4, 5, and 10 students. So to scale it, we have to take some template that we can pass on, and other motivated people have to take this and grow it.
And then probably the last question that I had is how are students graded on this? Like, how do you determine, is it accepted or?
Yeah, so that is as I said, I think it's a really critical piece that this counts toward their CS degree at their local university. And the grade is determined largely by the pull requests they make, the quality of those pull requests, and how far they've come from where they started to where they wind up. So we say at least 75% of the grade should be determined by the quality and the nature of those pull requests. And the faculty person ultimately is obviously responsible for assigning that grade. They interface with the mentor to ask for what we call a grade recommendation, which certainly heavily influences how the faculty person perceives things. But the faculty person's been meeting with those students week over week, so they have their own opinion too about the effort that's gone in.
Do you have any idea of like retention or continued involvement of students in the open source projects after they leave?
Yeah, so it's pretty good. We talked about this a little bit, that it's not uncommon for students to go work either at the company where their mentor works on using that project's technology there. That happens somewhat frequently, actually. And I think, at least in the case of my students, it's almost 100% in terms of them staying involved with the project after the course.
Great.
Okay, so we're out of time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.